When you think of Steve Jobs, you probably picture the black turtleneck, the iPhone reveals, the whole tech revolution thing. But behind that icon was a master storyteller. And honestly, the best way to really get who he was is through 3 stories from his own life, stories he shared with the world just a few years before he passed away. I mean, look at this guy. This is the man who didn't just build products. He built entire experiences that totally rewired how we live and connect with each other. His impact was absolutely monumental, but his path to get there, yeah, it was anything but a straight line. And hey, don't just take my word for it. These are his own words from that legendary 2005 Stanford commencement speech. They're going to be our roadmap for this explainer. No big, complicated business theories, nope. Just 3 simple stories that really unlock the life of a genius. Okay, but before we dive into his 3 stories, we kind of have to tackle the biggest myth about him first, the story of how Apple itself was founded. We've got to look past the legend to find out what really happened. We all know this image, right? You can practically see it in your head. 2 young visionaries, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, building the future in some humble suburban garage. It's the ultimate startup fairy tale, the Silicon Valley dream. But is that actually how it went down? Well, there you have it, straight from the other Steve. Wozniak says the garage was really more of a home base, not the workshop of legend. And this little gap between the myth and the reality, it's the perfect way to get into Jobs' first story, which is all about how life's real path is never what you think it's going to be. So, story number 1. This is all about trusting the journey, even when you have absolutely no clue where you're headed. It's a lesson he learned way, way before Apple was even a glimmer in his eye. So after he drops out of college, Jobs has no real plan. He's just following his curiosity. He decides to drop in on a calligraphy class, something that had 0 practical use in his life, or so he thought. Fast forward a decade, and he's designing the very first Macintosh, and it all comes flooding back. That calligraphy class, that's the reason the Mac, and pretty much every computer since, has beautiful fonts. And this just perfectly proves his point. And that's the big takeaway right there. You have to trust in something. Your gut, your destiny, karma, whatever you want to call it. Just follow your curiosity. Because you truly never know which one of these random dots will end up being the cornerstone of your greatest achievement. All right, on to the second story, love and loss. This one's dramatic. Right at the peak of his success, Jobs lost everything he had built. But somehow this massive public failure became the surprising spark for his most creative period ever. I mean, talk about a roller coaster. By the time he was 30, he'd built a $2 billion company. And then he got fired from it. In public, just devastating. But in that time away, he founded a company called Next and bought this little animation studio. Maybe you've heard of it, Pixar. He said it was one of the most creative periods of his entire life. I just love this quote. It completely reframes what failure means, doesn't it? He said, the heaviness of being successful was suddenly replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. It totally freed him up. That awful-tasting medicine actually made him a better leader. And the results? Well, they pretty much speak for themselves. When he came back in 1997, Apple was literally weeks away from going bankrupt. By the time he passed away in 2011, it was one of the most valuable companies on the planet. This wasn't just a comeback. It was one of the greatest turnarounds in the history of business. Period. And that brings us to the final story. And this one is the most profound. It's about how staring his own mortality right in the face became his single greatest source of motivation and of clarity. Jobs said that remembering he would be dead soon was the most important tool he ever had. And you have to ask why? Because in the face of death, all that other stuff, external expectations, pride, fear of failure, it all just falls away. All that's left is what is truly, truly important. And that clarity, man, it unleashed an unbelievable wave of innovation. First, boom, the iMac, which saved the company with its Think Different campaign. Then, the iPod, putting 1,000 songs in your pocket and changing music forever. And of course, the iPhone. This wasn't just product development. It was a full-blown revolution, fueled by this newfound sense of urgency. And this, right here, is the core lesson of it all. Don't get trapped by dogma or by the noise of what other people think. His brush with death gave him the ultimate courage to just follow his own inner voice, and that's what led him to his greatest successes. So, how do we wrap all these powerful stories up? Well, it all comes down to his final piece of advice. his parting wish for all of us, really. Now, you've probably heard his famous closing line, but here's a fun fact. He didn't actually come up with it. He borrowed it from the back cover of a counterculture magazine from when he was young called The Whole Earth Catalog. He said it was kind of like Google in paperback form, decades before Google even existed, and it had a huge influence on him. On the final issue, there was a picture of a country road, and right underneath it, these 4 words: stay hungry, meaning never be satisfied, always keep pushing for more, and stay foolish, be willing to take risks, to try things that other people think are just crazy. It was the wish he had for himself, and it was his wish for all of us. And that brings it all back to you. Jobs' story shows us that the most random, unpredictable parts of our lives can end up becoming our greatest strengths. So just take a second and think about it. What's the calligraphy class in your life right now? What's that one dot that you just have to trust is going to make all the difference down the road?